So we have, I think, an hour and a half scheduled for this. And what we'll do is my colleague Dan Maynard and I will talk to you probably for maybe half an hour of that, leaving then plenty of time at the end for any questions that you might have. Right. So let me see if I can make the slides change. There we go. So this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the 5 master's courses around ecology and biodiversity that we run at UCL. So 2 of those courses, the MRes in Biodiversity, Evolution and Conservation, and the MSc in Biodiversity and Global Change, are based at our Bloomsbury campus in North London, just south of Euston Station, very close to the centre of London. We run 3 other courses. The MSc in Ecology, Climate Change and Health, the MSc in Ecology and Urban Engineering, and the MSc in Ecology and Data Science. And those are all based at our new UCL East campus out in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in Stratford in East London. So each of those courses has an academic here at UCL responsible for overseeing that course, running and managing it. I will talk to the Bloomsbury courses, and then when I finish, Dan will talk about the courses that we run out of UCL East. So we value courses in ecology and biodiversity very highly at UCL. Ecology and biodiversity are fundamental to the workings of this planet. So Earth is the only planet we know of in the entire galaxy where life exists. And the life that we have here has been developing through the processes of evolution for about the last 3.8 to 4 billion years or so. And the result of all of that is an incredibly rich and diverse biosphere, home to millions of species of plants, animals, and microbes, of which humans are just one. And understanding the processes that have led to this biodiversity and that maintain this biodiversity, in other words, how the planet works, is a fundamental question in science. And it's not only a fundamental theoretical question, but it's also of extreme applied relevance. So humans depend on the processes that the rest of biodiversity carry out for our own existence. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat, all of this depends on biodiversity. And this is extremely important right now because biodiversity is in crisis. So human activities are continuing to drive the decline in biodiversity worldwide. And this is a trend that we need to reverse if we're going to maintain a healthy planet for all of us to enjoy into the future. And so the courses that we run aim to teach you and other students about some of these processes. So UCL is itself a world-class university. It frequently is ranked in the top 10 universities worldwide. And the courses that we run are based in the Department of Genetics, Evolution and Environment, but draw on the expertise of a range of other departments across the University of UCL. So I'm based in the Centre for Biodiversity and Environment Research, but we also draw on expertise from computer science, the Bartlett, our architecture school, geography, and the School of Civil Engineering. Not only that, but because we're based in London, which is one of the world centres for biodiversity and ecological research, we also partner on these courses with scientists and researchers from other organisations within London, notably the Natural History Museum and the Zoological Society of London, based at London Zoo. And so the courses that we run involve academics, scientists, and applied conservation biologists working at all of these different institutions. So as I said, I will start by just describing some of the background to the 2 courses at Bloomsbury, and then I'll hand over to Dan to talk about the courses at UCL East. So I'll kick off with our Masters by Research in Biodiversity, Evolution and Conservation. So this is the first of the biodiversity Masters courses that we set up, and it's been running at UCL since 2012, and all that time in partnership with the Natural History Museum and the Zoological Society of London. So the aim of the course is to essentially prime students for a career in biodiversity research. So the course will introduce you to the latest biodiversity science, how that science is applied to guide conservation, and also give you some of the key skills that you'll need to actually become an effective researcher in the field of biodiversity science. So this is the course structure. So unusually for these master's courses, all of the modules in this course are compulsory. So there is no choice in terms of the modules that you actually get to do, although there is obviously a lot of choice in terms of the research projects that you get to do. So term one runs from October to December, and that is where we do the taught modules for this particular course. There are 4 of these: science communication, computational methods, biodiversity generation and maintenance, and analytical tools in biodiversity, evolutionary and conservation research. So just to briefly introduce those courses. So science communication for biologists is where we teach you all of the different ways in which scientists communicate with other scientists, but also with the media and the general public more widely. So this course is led by Dr. Adam Rutherford. If you're into your BBC radio, you will probably know Adam very well from his various programs. He is an extremely experienced broadcaster and also writes popular science books on the topic of genetics. The typical ways that scientists communicate with other scientists are through writing papers and giving talks at conferences. But the point of this module is that you'll learn lots of other ways of communicating as well. So communicating through the written media, through the broadcast media, and interacting with the general public. And to get that, or to give you experience of that, we bring in a wide range of different scientists and communicators who have experience of talking and communicating science in all of these different ways. So this is the group of scientists from one particular year, but it varies from year to year depending on who's available. The main parts of the course are sort of 2 related modules: our biodiversity generation and maintenance and our analytical tools modules. So these are essentially the core parts of the course that teach you about fundamental principles in ecology and evolution, and how those affect and determine patterns and change in biodiversity. So these modules, they start out at UCL, where you're introduced to sort of patterns in biodiversity, species coexistence, and so on. You then move on to lectures at the Natural History Museum on some of the processes that drive the origin and change in biodiversity, speciation, phylogenetics, morphological evolution, and so on. Then in the second half of term, after reading week, you move on to ZSL, where the focus becomes much more on sort of the change in biodiversity, human impacts, and some of the technology by which we sort of help conserve biodiversity. And then in the end, we move back to UCL to think about the future of biodiversity, the responses of organisms to changing environments, and what that's going to mean into the future. And these 2 courses are essentially sort of 2 halves of this. So the generation and maintenance is the sort of the lectured, the taught part, and then the analytical tools is more about the teaching you about some of the methods that you use to address these questions. So it's helping to set you up as effective researchers in the biodiversity field. The final taught module in term 1 is computational methods. So this is where we introduce you to data wrangling and analysis. So the first half we teach you about data science, how we go about compiling and sort of organizing data to do the sorts of analysis that all science needs. And then the second part of the course focuses on data analysis using the R statistical program. However, the first few days of this module are devoted to a field trip. So this is literally the first thing that you do on the course after induction week. We take you out to Blakeney Point, where UCL has had a field station for more than 100 years. And we get you to start thinking about how you might design and plan and execute sort of studies in the field of biodiversity. So this is also a good opportunity for you to get to know some of the course mates on your course and on the MSc in Biodiversity and Global Change course, and also get to know some of us, because we will be there leading you and sort of directing your time out there. And Blakeney Point is a national nature reserve. It's largely owned by National Trust, although UCL has its field station out there, and it's an extremely interesting and rich place to see native biodiversity in the UK. So all of these are photographs of species that I've taken on various field courses with other master's cohorts. That's the taught element. And then in terms 2 and 3, you will do 2 research projects. So each of those runs for about 3.5 months. So the first one goes from January to the end of April. Then we encourage students to have a short break before the beginning of May, when the second project starts, and that runs, the research part of that runs through to the middle, sort of early to middle of August. Then there's a break for a couple of weeks, and then we have the closing symposium for the Bloomsbury Masters courses. So there are 2 research projects, and we insist that every student does each of these projects at a different 2 of the 3 partners involved in the courses. So you'll either do your projects at UCL and NHM, or UCL and ZSL, or NHM and ZSL. Those projects will mean that you will go and join a research group at one of those organizations. So you'll be embedded in that research group, and you'll learn about the research cultures at these different organizations. The projects can be desk-based, computational, they can be lab studies, they can be fieldwork studies. The first project is assessed by a written dissertation and a poster session that we run, I think towards the end of April. And the second project is also assessed by a dissertation, but then a set of symposium talks that we run normally sort of early to mid-September. The projects are, we compile a project booklet. The various researchers at the different organizations will submit projects for students to choose from. However, we do also encourage students to design or work to design their own project if none of the projects in the booklet are of a special interest to that student. And what we tend to find is that for the first project, most students will take projects from the booklet, but in the second project, far more students then have the confidence to design their own project and carry that out. And just to give you an example, so these are the projects that the current MRes students have just started on in the last week. So I know there's a lot of small text on here, but this is just to give you a flavour of the sorts of projects that we do. Everything from sort of deep time questions around climate change in the Triassic Jurassic period, hundreds of millions of years ago, through to the current ecological role of parasitoid wasps, frog visual systems, and the impact of climate on African wild dogs. wide range of topics. Moving on to the MSc in Biodiversity and Global Change. So this is a newer course. It's been running for the last 5 years, I think, since 2022. The course structure is more taught elements and only one research project. So some of those taught elements are the same as for the MRes, the MRes BEC. So you have 4 compulsory modules: biodiversity generation and maintenance, and computational methods we've already talked about. The research project in term 3 goes from April to sort of mid-September, sort of late August, September, so slightly longer than each of the MRes projects. And also you get to choose 2 optional modules. So as well as the modules that we've talked about, as I say, there are 2 compulsory modules. We have decision science for conservation, which is run out of the Zoological Society of London. And we have biodiversity dynamics on a changing planet, which is run out of the Natural History Museum. So the decision science module basically teaches you how sort of decisions, conservation decisions are made, and how we actually go about, planning and applying real world conservation. And the biodiversity dynamics on a changing planet is based on how sort of museum collections can be leveraged to understand sort of the evolutionary history of the planet and how biodiversity is going to change into the future. And then there is the research project, which is sort of 50% of the course credits, and that is structured very similarly to each of the MRes projects that I've just talked about. So a booklet goes out, you can choose from that, or you can design your own project. And at the end, you hand in a dissertation and give a talk to the symposium that finishes the Bloomsbury Masters courses. There are then a range of optional modules that you can choose as well. So here are the options that the current students have had to choose from, although we do constantly review these and add or subtract as the case may be. Sometimes we run into scheduling problems, obviously, with some of these modules. So here is the course structure overall. So in the first term, you spend a lot of time in the same room as the MRes BEC students, but then after Christmas in January, you largely go your separate ways. So those are the Bloomsbury courses, and I will now hand over to my colleague Dan to talk about the courses at UCL East.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to talk with you. Thanks for joining. Just a little introduction about myself. So my name is Daniel Maynard. I'm Associate Professor of Quantitative Ecology here. And I'm in what's called the People in Nature Lab. So the People in Nature Lab is actually a subset of CBER, the Center for Biodiversity and Environment Research. And loosely, we're a group of CBER who focuses on maybe more tech issues, maybe a little more quantitative, using AI, maybe a little more solution focused, although this is quite a vague distinction in a lot of ways. But we're unified by sort of trying to push the boundaries from a more computational tech side of things. We're a group of researchers not just limited to CBER, but we work with robotics, we work with the built environment, we work with Bartlett, people from across computer science. So part of the People in Nature is really about designing these interdisciplinary solutions to addressing challenges about fundamental biodiversity loss. Yeah, next slide, Tim. So we have 3 programs that we offer, and we call them our Ecology Plus programs. As you'll see, it's because they all deal with ecology plus something else. And this is really the core idea, is realizing that designing solutions to the biodiversity crisis, to climate change, they involve bringing people from across disciplines. So we can't just become experts in ecology. If we want to make change, we have to become experts or work with people or speak the language of experts from other domains as well. And so a lot of them fall and they build on the the modules that Tim has just talked about, the programs Tim has just talked about. They follow the same MSc structure, which I'll talk about in a minute. Really, what they focus on is everyone building a core ecology background, but then supplementing it with some different expertise. So the first one I'll talk about is the ecology, climate change, and health. Next slide, Tim. And so the idea here is that increasingly we realize that solutions to biodiversity loss, climate change, they deal with this interconnectedness of basically all living things, that human health, wildlife health, planetary health are fundamentally interlinked. So this program focuses on not just learning about what is the ecological side of things, but learning about how it links with things like zoonotic diseases, how it links with different epidemiological crises, trying to understand a really great example, unfortunate one, is COVID-19, and realizing that that is at least possibly due to things like degradation of the environment, where we see humans coming in closer contact with these novel diseases that we didn't previously had, primarily carried by animals. But also realizing that, for example, this little figure on the left showing in Denmark, that high levels of green space can be associated with better mental health. We see this to hospitals as well. So if people have access to outdoor space when they're in a hospital, they can recover better. So this course deals with essentially unifying all these themes. So it's biodiversity, it's human health, it's public health, it's wildlife health as well. Next slide, Tim. So to give you a core for how these work, so they all fall essentially very similar to the MSc programs that Tim had talked about. We have 2 terms of taking individual courses, modules, and then term 3 is this summer term where you do your dissertation project. So the one thing I'll note is for all of these slides, the optional modules on the left-hand side, they give you a flavor for the types of optional modules that are available. These change year to year, in part just due to scheduling issues. So for the ones that are taken in other departments, if they work, we can fit them in. So just if you're interested in the most recent up-to-date optional modules for next year, please send me an email and I can get those for you. But we probably won't know until maybe midsummer or so. And again, so this is all of UCLs on a 3-term system. So term 1 and 2, mostly where you take your modules. Undergraduates, term 3 is where they do their exams for its dissertations. For the Ecology Plus programs, they follow a very similar structure. So in term 1, you take your foundations module. So in this case, it's foundations of ecology, climate change, and health. Essentially, it's a survey of the important ideas that you'll be talking about throughout the rest of your master's. We take this computational methods of biodiversity research, which Tim talked about as well. So this is the fundamental stats programming language. We focus on the R programming language. And again, we assume almost no background in stats or programming at all, in part because these Ecology Plus masters are meant to bring in people who maybe have no data science background or maybe have no ecology background. So there's a really broad set of people taking, for example, this course, we get people who have medical backgrounds who are pivoting to a different career. So we start really basic in this and we build up some basic computational methods, which then in term 2, for example, you can take data science, ecology, climate change, and health, which is where we start to focus on the data science applications unique to your specific module. So in this, we focus a lot on spatial questions about diseases in a spatial context, but also just building out this core statistical machinery that you need if you want, for example, to work for an NGO afterwards. You also take your optional modules. You can either take 2, you can load them up in term 1, or you can split them across term 1 and term 2, depending on what you're interested in taking. And then in term 2, it's these sort of capstone projects, so human and ecosystem health, data science. And then the important one is this Nature Smart Challenge. So all of the Ecology Plus programs have a Nature Smart Challenge. This actually runs through term 1 into term 3, so it overlaps with the start of your dissertation project. And this is a really cool, innovative project where you get paired up with a current NGO, or it could be a government organization, or in some cases, it's an industry partner. So Yeo Valley, the yogurt company, for example, is one of the partners this year. We have Forest Research, the Forestry Commission is a partner. So we have about a dozen partners every year, and they propose some sort of challenge that they're trying to solve. And what you work on over that term and a half is in a small group working with this organization to design a solution to that real world problem that you're facing. And so it's somewhere between a dissertation project and course learning, because you are learning these ideas, but you actually get to put them into practice. Some of these have gone on to lead to publications, or people have then gone on to work for the companies that they worked for, that they designed the solution for Nature Smart Challenge. It's a very cool way that works, sort of leverages this interdisciplinary nature. And then lastly, in term three, dissertation project, again, this starts in the late spring and runs through to August. This is a full-time, so all of the MSc are full-time masters, so they run for a full year. Fortunately, you don't get summers off. So you'll be here, but you'll get paired up working in a research lab, working on a project, in this case, related to some aspect of climate change and health as well. Next slide, Tim. So that was climate change and health. The other second one of our Ecology Plus is ecology and urban engineering. Yeah, you can go on, Tim. So the idea here is realizing that when we start to think about the built environment, so not just about biodiversity or climate change, but how do we actually design built environments of the future? So sustainable, biodiverse, uh, carbon neutral cities of the future, and realizing that this involves having to have some knowledge of both ecology as well as knowledge of actually things like design. It doesn't have to just be urban settings, right? Any sort of future building in the future, we're looking at things like green roofs. We're trying to figure out how we can have what we call biodiversity net gain. So the act of building that building doesn't lead to any losses in biodiversity. How we can optimize things like energy consumption and use by building, for example, very energy efficient buildings. So in this ecology masters, you work with, for example, the Bartlett School, one of the premier architectural schools in the world, to actually look at how in the past we have built in different structures, how we might build them in the future, focusing on things like sustainability, where raw materials come from, how you can interface with things like pollination networks to build more healthy landscapes around the environment. This is done through a lot of site visits. So actually go to these areas all around London. You do case studies to look at their intent when they built these structures and try to look at the impacts, biodiversity, carbon impacts, as well as the aesthetics, really thinking through this lens back to climate change and health, that aesthetics are really important. So, for example, this building on the right, this really beautiful built building, obviously this has an aesthetic that maybe is more pleasing to live around, and that can really impact human well-being as well. So realizing that even when you're building this environment, we're still linking human health and ecosystem health. Next slide, Tim. So again, you're going to get sick of seeing this, but this is only the second of three. So they follow all the same approach. So again, optional modules here, again, are just a sample of what you could take. Term one is your foundations module. So you take foundations of nature and climate-friendly urban designs. And this focuses on this fundamental question of what is a sustainable built environment? How do we focus on carbon neutral? How do we focus on biodiversity? And how do we focus on human health and well-being? Computational methods, you'll see this is consistent because increasingly ecology, the sciences are about being able to do analyses, do research, understand data in many different ways. This one also takes foundations in ecology and ecological monitoring. Another really common one, we'll see it in the next module as well. Just make sure everyone who gets into this course understands the basics of ecology, biodiversity, how we actually sample and monitor and build these data sets. Term two, where we do this capstone course, so tools for building a sustainable, resilient city. So this actually moves beyond just understanding. So again, moving on to case studies and site visits to really look into the details of how we build these different cities. You have your optional modules. These can include things like citizen science, tech for nature, if you're really interested in looking at sensor design, things like bioacoustic sensors, AI for the environment, if you want to try to really dig into Python and how we actually build some of these neural networks and deep learning models to analyze data sets, as well as things like inclusive design, spatial design, and databases, so things specific to the urban environment. And then Nature Smart Challenge, it works exactly the same as in climate change and health. We pair you up with some partner organizations. So in some case, that might be something, for example, like London Parks, who have specific land use issues, or it could be that there's an engineering firm who's looking for design suggestions. And you work with them in small groups over a term and a half to design a real world solution to their challenges. And then lastly, a dissertation project. Again, and this works the same as Tim mentioned, we put forward a set of projects, a set of booklets, and you would pick from those projects. You can certainly pick across, but most pick from projects from people involved here, possibly the Bartlett if they contribute ideas as well, specifically focused on urban design. Next slide, Tim. So the last one is our longest running program, and I should say all of these Ecology Plus programs are relatively new, so I'll talk a little bit more about UCL East in a minute, but they've been running for about 3.5 years now. Ecology and Data Science was the first, and it's currently the largest program as well. Next slide. So the idea behind ecology and data science is realizing that, as I said, increasingly ecological sciences, biodiversity crisis is a data-driven field. And everything we do as research nowadays is really focused on data in one way or another, that those data sets are growing massively. And at the same time, the tools we can use to analyze them are growing massively as well through things like AI and deep learning. And so the idea here is to develop a core set of understanding of the tools that we can use to interpret, analyze, read in data of all different types, whether it's camera trap data like we're seeing in the top, bioacoustic data, this sort of weird little what we call spectrogram overlaid. What you're seeing in the lower right is what's called an echo box. So these are set up all around the Olympic Park, which is where UCL East is, and they're constantly monitoring real-time bat activity using these little AI modules on them. And so part of what you do in one of the courses, you actually design sensors like this, but you also learn how to analyze these types of data using the latest cutting edge deep learning neural network approaches as well. The idea is to actually really create this sort of new generation of ecologists that are data savvy, particularly in this world. I'm sure all of you use AI increasingly in your daily lives, but realizing how we're asking the question of how we can apply that to natural ecosystems as well. Next slide, Tim. So we have 3 terms as well. Again, exact same structure. Term 1 is the foundation term, so learning the foundations of ecology as well as computational methods. And again, it's worth realizing that in most of these programs, particularly for the Ecology Plus, we have some people that have a pure ecology background with no data science, some people that have a pure data science, math, finance background with no ecology. And so part of this term is to give you all that sort of core language that allows you to speak up the same topics, understand the core of both ecology and in this case, data science as well. So again, they start from the ground up. So if you're an expert in data science, you might find the computation methods relatively easy. If you're an expert in ecology, you might find that first thing basically being a review term. But the idea is by the time you get to term 2, where you're going to be definitely doing new things one way or another, you all have this core set of skills. For this term 2, we have a very cool class called Tech for Nature. As I mentioned, this is where you actually design the sensors that you will then use to analyze data in AI for the environment. So you look at bioacoustic sensors, camera trap data, look at things like remote sensing, trying to understand where these data come from. And then AI for the environment is this capstone deep learning AI module where you switch from R over to Python, and you actually learn how to fit some of these basic models, how to analyze data in real time coming in through these sensors. And then the Nature Smart Challenge, you'll get paired up with an organization who's interested in a data science question specifically. So one that's been working on this for a long time is a little startup called ChuRup, who they build bioacoustic sensors that can monitor bird activity. So a lot of farms are now using this as a really cheap way to monitor and measure biodiversity. And they have a lot of problems that they still need solved. And so that's a good example where they give a problem to a student group and they work on it. And then last year, dissertation workshop for ecology and data science your dissertation project is going to be much more data heavy project. So usually it's analyzing data, simulating data, really focusing on applying some of these AI tools that you learned throughout your course. Next slide, Tim. So just to recap, so they all follow this exact same approach. Optional modules pick a little bit from all these. So there's not a huge amount of distinction. If you're interested in ecology, climate change, and health, but you also want to do AI for the environment, those sorts of options are available, right? If you want to focus on a hybrid of these types of things, they all follow the same course, 2 terms, first one being foundation, second one capstone, term 3 is where you get into your dissertation project. And again, that will run until the end of August, where you'll hand in your thesis, and then we'll do a presentation to the rest of your group. Next slide. So just a little bit about the UCL East campus. So the main campus that where University College London was founded is in called Bloomsbury campus, essentially the heart of London. UCL East campus is built around and on the Olympic Park, which is built for the 2012 Olympics. Really beautiful space. So we're right next to the London Stadium, which is now the West Ham Stadium. And the idea is that all of the entities, all the groups, the organizations that are running out of UCL East are fundamentally multidisciplinary. So we're embedded, our office space we share with robotics and connected environments from the Bartlett. And the idea is to foster these, essentially in our case, Ecology Plus solutions. So trying to work with these different organizations. But it also means we have the Olympic Park, for example, as a testing bed for sensors, as we saw with the Echo Box. And it also means we're embedded with some of the other founding partners. So East Bank, Sadler's Wells, BBC, they're all out there as well. We're part of this larger called the London Legacy Organization, which helps to bring these organizations together. So a really thriving place to bring together different entities as well as application through things like these Tech for Nature programs. Next slide, Tim. Just really briefly, so we're in phase one. We have two large buildings. So on the left, there's towers. So for some of the master students, you can get accommodations over here. Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's actually where our offices are there on the first three floors of there as well. And then on the right-hand side, that other building is Marshgate. That's pure research. That's not just for us. So there's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is over there as well. So a lot of these different entities that have home bases here at the main campus and are also focused out there. Really beautiful campus, tons of space. I'm sure Tim will attest to, yeah, that it's much more open design. You can go out for a walk in the park. It's a really beautiful place to be. And this is just the first of several phases. So the plan eventually is to build several more of these buildings, so really massive expansion of UCL. Next slide. What else the other thing I think makes UCL East really impressive is that it was built to be sustainable, a sustainable living lab and a sustainable campus. So I'm on the sustainability committee there. So we actually look at how we can make sure that our use of this park essentially has minimal impact on the biodiversity. We have a biodiversity action and park management plan for the park. We have things like the biodiversity meadow in the lower right. We have a rooftop garden that the People in Nature Lab manages. That's both for experiments, but also just human health and well-being. We can go out there and we have a little space that's our own, but also minimizes the carbon footprint, the energy footprint of that building. So really just cool place, again, putting into action a lot of these ideas from ecology, climate change, and health, as well as urban and sustainable design. Next page. And the last thing I want to say is that this is, at UCL East, we're sort of bringing together all these different groups. So again, we're People in Nature Lab, part of the Center for Biodiversity and Environment Research, which is part of the Department of Genetics, Evolution, and Environment. But on a daily basis, I'm going to interact with people from the Global Business School for Health, the Bartlett, or School for Creative and Cultural Industries. We're all working together, we're embedded together, we're in this very open space, sort of modern design building, which the idea is that if we start to think of an idea, if I think that would be great to think about how we could monitor some aspect of biodiversity, I could go and talk with someone in robotics, who's the next desk over, and actually ask them if this sort of thing might be possible. And it's been really great. We have a lot of different grants, projects. Students have done these cross-disciplinary projects for their theses as well by leveraging this different expertise across UCL East. Next slide. I think that's it. And just so I didn't say this originally, but I'm the program director specifically for ecology and data science. Ellie Leadbeater manages ecology, climate change, and health, and then Dean Bell oversees ecology and urban engineering. And all of this, Kate Jones is the center coordinator for the UCL East, and so she sort of looks over all of these as well. Full-time courses, class sizes range from about 15 to 50 students. So again, 50 students is for the ecology and data science, our longest running at UCL East, and the others we tend to want to have these more manageable sizes of about 15 students, which is enough to have good group discussions, but also when you do things like site visits, you can actually really get in there and talk to people and get some great hands-on experience. I think that might be it, Tim. I think it's back to you after this.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. So I'll just finish up with a couple of extra things that you might be interested in. Obviously, given that the courses that we run are run alongside partners within the university, partners from the Natural History Museum and the Zoological Society, there are lots and lots of opportunities for networking within the course. So all of the three major institutions run seminars, talks, and evening events that you're all invited to and encouraged to attend. UCL has its Conservation Society. CBER and the People and Nature Lab. So I work in CBER, Dan's in People and Nature. We have regular social events. We have sort of weekly lunch get-togethers in CBER. We have monthly CBER socials, and there are similar social events in People and Nature. So opportunities to actually come along and meet PhD students, postdocs, and PIs working in these organizations. When you do your research projects, you'll be sort of embedded in real active research labs, doing sort of real world science and conservation. And so you'll get to know the people in those labs and how research labs work. And UCL is part of the wider London Centre for Ecology and Evolution. So a grouping of several organisations across the city that run a series of evening events and social events based around topics of ecology and evolution, sometimes at the Linnaean Society, sometimes at the Natural History Museum, at different sites around the city. So lots of opportunities to meet other students, other scientists working on similar questions and with similar interests to those that you'll be bringing into these courses. And then just briefly mention where our students go after they finish the course or the courses. And there's a whole range of places that students go. A lot stay in academia, go on to do PhDs, postdocs, become fellows. You'll meet several of those students at different career stages through the courses that you do. But lots of students go on to work in other sort of research institutions. They work for the government, they work for NGOs, particularly conservation NGOs. They go on to consultancies, all sorts of careers. So here's just a few of our alumni that have gone on to study. So Rory Gibbs, now a Royal Society University Research Fellow at UCL, so I suspect you'll meet him on the courses. He was in the first cohort of the MRes Beck back in 2012. But we have lots of students now doing PhDs or having completed PhDs or doing sort of research projects in different organizations. Not just research, of course, so students go on to do all sorts of things. So Eve Rooney there in sustainable investing, Rosie Cluett, she's a marine ecologist at the JNCC, so it's a government-run organisation. Becky Downey, community organising manager at Bucks and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. Emily Hay, she's a solicitor doing environmental work at one of the major solicitors in London. Lots of different careers that our students go on to, and through LinkedIn and social media, it's great that we can actually keep in touch with these students and watch their careers develop over time. And sometimes, like Rory, they come back and join us on the academic staff in these organisations. So I think that's all we want to say. I'm going to stop screen sharing now and open the floor to any questions that you might have. So do feel free to ask. You can either type questions in the chat or put your hand up and unblank your screen and talk to us directly. The choice is yours, but we'll be very happy to answer any questions that you might have, or at least try and do that to the best of our ability.
I'm wondering with the hi, sorry, I'm Sebastian.
Hi, Sebastian.
I'm wondering with the urbanism one specifically, because I come from architecture, and obviously I'm seeing that overlap with the barbed and stuff. How much is it about kind of proposing interventions versus the kind of case studies and the kind of post-occupancy kind of sensing that you're talking about? Where would that fit into the course structure?
Yeah, and specifically for, sorry, did you say ecology and urban engineering?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the focus is looking at what the intents of these buildings were. So trying to understand, for example, yeah, looking at some of the newer developments and trying to understand how they are trying, like what the challenges are. So if there's space challenges, if there's challenges with things like water runoff, for example, right? What were the core challenges they are balancing? And so the case studies, for example, in your term two, will focus on this. And but also then by the end, by the second term, you'll then start to essentially go back and say, here's how we would have done it differently. So here's suggestions they could have used, so maybe use different materials to make it more carbon neutral, or maybe there are different ways that they could have designed runoff channels, or could be something like green roofs as solutions to biodiversity net gain challenges. So it's looking at this holistic. I mean, it's not an engineering architecture course. So if you want engineering architecture, that would be the Bartlett. This is about sort of giving you the language where then you could work with an architecture or an engineer with expertise on the ecology biodiversity side of things to understand how you could better design buildings, solutions, cityscapes, urban landscapes going forward that address these twin challenges of basically carbon and biodiversity.
And I was also wondering, with those kind of projects, how much is there an exploration of the kind of slightly more ideological or philosophical underpinnings of like the design intentions, or I'm sure the kind
Uh,
of trade-offs maybe that are made in certain ecological decisions.
yeah, I think, I mean, I think that is very much what the point of it is, right? Realizing that if you want to focus, by definition of building something, it's not nature. So the idea is how you minimize these trade-offs, right? So everything you're doing has some sort of trade-off. If you want to minimize energy footprint, that often means smaller buildings, right? In the simplest sense. So realizing there are demands and there are human demands, and very much when we build these things, first and foremost, it's what do we need from a society in these specific areas. But then realizing that there are going to be a lot of unintended consequences. So part of it is how do you do the best with what we can? How do we build these environments? So absolutely, those are fit in, and the really nice part again, if you look, there's only few core courses for all of these. You can really supplement this with your optional modules. So depending on what you're particularly interested in, or when you pick your Nature Smart Challenge partners, so pick something that really appeals to you. And then lastly, the project as well. So part of this is this core foundation, and then there's a lot of room to build out what you're really interested in.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a message in the online chat from another Sebastian. What's the typical cohort size for the MRes, and how much freedom do you get in creating your own research project at ZSL if you were to go that route for the second project? So typically for the Bloomsbury Masters, we have around about 30 students across the two courses. So year to year it varies whether most students are on the MSc or on the MRes BEC. So this year, as it happens, we have a slightly larger cohort size on the MRes. I think we've got what are we about 17 or 18 on the MRes and about a dozen on the MSc Biodiversity and Global Change. But typically around about 30. I think the most we've ever had is across the two courses together is around about 35. So that's a typical class size. So some of the BEC modules. So I guess the analytical tools module is exclusive to the BEC. So that is just students on that particular course. So for that, the class size is generally in the sort of 12 to 20 sort of size. But then depending on who takes the other modules, that they can be a little bit larger. In terms of the research project, so I guess there are two things here. So we encourage you to pursue areas in which you're interested. So we like you to have the freedom to propose and to pursue questions and topics of interest to you. But the flip side of that is that it's a 1 year course. The research projects are not very long, and what we want is to make sure that those projects will work for you, so that you'll be able to, get usable data. You'll be able to analyze those data, and you'll be able to write that up into a sort of a high quality dissertation within the time. So what we insist is that all of those projects are sort of quality controlled. So you would have to work with a specific supervisor at one of the organizations to develop that project. And we do have to sort of make sure that it's going to work for you. So on the one hand, yes, we'd like you to have freedom and we like you to, give free rein to your interest and imaginations. But the flip side is that we also need to make sure that at the end of it, you'll come out with something that is workable. And obviously, the people that you work with at these organizations have abundant experience in designing and supervising research projects. So the person that you work with will sort of make absolutely sure that everything is as good as it can be. I see a hand raised. So Fernando, do feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello. My name is Fernando Salvador. I am from Lima, Peru. And I am interested in the Master in Ecology and Urban Engineering because currently I am working in a urban forest field as I am a arborist, certified arborist, and urban forester. And currently, Lima is facing a boom in housing, you know, and frequently I work with buildings, with constructors, builders, and I noticed that we have a necessity to approach the biodiversity in the cities. And but also I am searching, I am looking for more advanced education. For that reason, I am trying to apply to this master, but I have a doubt. I think what are the main difference with green infrastructure and also the similarities?
So your question was, what is the difference with, I didn't hear, with green infrastructure versus?
Yeah, yeah. I would like to hear about what is the main difference between the master related to green infrastructure with the master in ecology and urban engineering.
So I don't actually know the green infrastructure masters, but is it out of the Bartlett? Do you know, Fernando?
Excuse me?
Do you know which department has the green infrastructure masters? I'm not familiar with this one.
Oh, okay, yeah, not in UCL, but I think Manchester University have a master in green infrastructure, and also I made some research about it, and I was looking for some information.
Yeah, without knowing in detail, I can't say specifically, but I think one of the biggest differences is that still this is what makes this course unique would be two things. First off, it still is part of a department that's an environmental department, right? So genetics, evolution, and environment. So first and foremost, it's a degree in the ecology side of things. And what we focus on is understanding this, or primarily understanding the links between the built environment and its effects on nature. So it's not just an engineering degree. It's not where you just learn how to build green buildings, right? It's about trying to understand how things are interlinked. So realizing that decisions we make affect wildlife health, human health, water quality, air pollution, right? And so it's 50% on how you build things, how you design things, 50% also on the ecological side of things. And if you look at the modules you would take, again, you take these foundations in ecology. So you learn about biodiversity, you learn about how data are measured. It's also slightly going to be more data heavy because it's embedded in the People in Nature Lab, which is very much focuses on data. So the idea is how we can really make data-driven solutions. So not just about what's a beautiful design, but how can we actually look at places, try to understand the features of urban designs that actually have tangible impacts by looking at different data sets in that sense. So sort of bringing a bit more ecology, a bit more data science, because we do work with, for example, people in the Bartlett, and the Bartlett has their own master's degree programs in these similar topics, but they're very, very much focused on the actual design versus, as Sebastian said, trying to understand these trade-offs between human and biodiversity and environmental health.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Fernando. So Hannah has a question about the average contact hours for the Ecology and Data Science MSc. So I guess, Dan, that's...
Yeah, so I think more general. So basically, you would take, sorry, I've just turned on the light, but now I'm sort of fluorescent. 1 second. Let's go with this light instead. There we go. So yeah, I would say most of the courses, the way they would work is most modules or courses, we call them modules. You typically have about 2 hours of class time per week, and followed by 2 hours of a practical. So that could be a laboratory practical, computer practical. So typically about 4 hours of class time per week. This can vary a little bit. So some I guess again can meet twice a week. Some kind of slightly shorter, longer practicals, but generally about 4 hours of module course time per week. And then you'd be taking 3 or 4 modules per term. So roughly we're going to be looking at anywhere between sort of 12 and 16 actual class hours per week. But it's worth realizing that there's an expectation that you're still doing about 50% of your coursework is done on your own. So you're only meeting once a week for actual lectures. And then there is a lot of self-learning that's expected here. And then when you get into your project term for your third term, that would sort of be 40 hours, you're sort of supposed to be full-time working on your dissertation during that third term. Does that align, Tim, too, with the other programs largely?
Yeah, I think they're all pretty aligned in this because UCL has a standard system of contact hours that
Yeah.
we expect the students to run. Yeah, so that in Bloomsbury it's basically I think 4 days of teaching in a week where it's basically like that 2+2
Yeah.
2+2 setup. I should also say that I guess Dan, the East Masters can be done part-time, so you could do them part-time over 2 years, which I should have clarified that that's not the case for the Bloomsbury ones. So the Bloomsbury courses are both full-time.
Yeah, and we do have a number of students every year who do the part-time. I mean, that can be great, particularly if you, if you're working for a company that maybe links in with your projects, you can actually, so we have a student who's really interested in taking data from their company and using it, doing their dissertation on what they're working on for their work. So to try to sort of do added value to their work. It can be really nice because you have a longer period of time to actually work on your dissertation and think about it. And again, the timing of that changes from year to year. So if you are interested in part-time, send me an email and I can put you in touch with our course administrator and they can give you the latest sort of updated timetabling that you would expect for next term. I should say again, timetabling unfortunately doesn't get to one of the last things that gets finalized. So when the courses actually meet, but we can at least give you an idea of what modules are available and when we expect them to happen.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And just to add, as you might imagine, timetabling at a university like UCL is something of a nightmare. Inez, I see your hand is up.
Yes, hi. So you mentioned that apart from the dissertation, then you have like talks and posters. I was wondering if master's students have like opportunities to speak as well and also potentially to teach, or is that very lab dependent?
Shall I?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, basically there are all sorts of opportunities. So generally, what we find is that so speaking for the Bloomsbury courses, in the science communication, you'll get an opportunity to present there. In fact, one of the assessments for that is a presentation. So Adam runs a small sort of talk symposium, usually at the zoo, normally around about now, where everyone on that course gives a presentation on a topic that they've researched. Then when you go into doing your research project, so the first one, as I said, is assessed by a poster. The second one is a talk at the end, but there's certainly no reason why. So for example, in SIBA, we have every week, I think, or is it every fortnight, we have a sort of a SIBA internal seminar series. We have a couple of speakers, one from UCL East, one from Bloomsbury, who gives a talk. And there's no reason why that couldn't be one of the master's students. What we tend to find is that master's students don't want to do talks. So, we have to drag them up to the stage to do the talks that they do have to do. But certainly we're very open to any opportunities. And of course, through CEE and spending time at the zoo and the museum, there's no reason equally why you couldn't organize to speak there if that was something that you really wanted to do. And often I think people find it useful writing a talk to actually sort of digging deeper into what they do and don't understand about the research that they're doing. Certainly, I've been researching for almost 40 years and I still finding, writing a talk is always an interesting process for identifying gaps in my knowledge. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add is that for your dissertation, you'll be working with a lab group. So very often you can sort of get embedded in that group and attend their lab meetings. And very often for a lot of different groups, lab meetings involve giving little mini presentations and updates. And every teacher, like if you're interested more on the teaching side, there's no real formal way that master's students actually get involved in teaching, but all of us are teaching modules. So if you are working with a supervisor, so you might be able to help out or even give sort of a guest lecture on things like this if you already have some background that really well. Students also do sometimes go to conferences in the summer. So this can be conferences can be quite expensive, but sometimes as a group they might go together if there's something local. So there's some good opportunities where we every year have a group of students who give poster presentations or even sometimes oral presentations at these conferences as well.
Thank you, Inez.
Thanks.
So a question from Valia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, about the academic backgrounds on students on the MSc Biodiversity, and particularly whether a computer science background would be sufficient. So I will say that over the years, I mean, the MRes has been running for the longest, and over the years we've had students with all sorts of different backgrounds come onto the course. But you don't have to have a background in ecology or biodiversity science. So in the past, we've even had students with an arts background. I think what we found over the years from running these courses is that what you really do need is some sort of grounding in a quantitative discipline. So you need to be used to handling numbers and potentially analyzing them, although analysis is a very broad church. But I think some sort of quantitative skills are a good thing. So where we've had issues in the past is I think where students come in with a purely arts background and getting their head around statistical analysis and sort of programming in a language like R has been a shock to the system. So clearly, if you have a computer science background, then programming in a language is not something that is going to be as big a challenge for you as some of the other things. So in terms of sort of getting a biodiversity exposure, I think, yeah, that's a difficult thing to judge. I don't think it's necessarily something that you need, because when you come into the course, as Dan was saying, often we have these sort of foundational modules that are sort of giving you the background to the study. And I think that's an easier thing to pick up. If you don't have a background in biodiversity, it's easier to pick up some of the biodiversity sort of principles than it is coming in with no background in any sort of quantitative discipline and then trying to pick up programming and or statistics. So the point of our modules is that we're getting you all up to speed on these things, but I do think some sort of quantitative background is really what you need.
And just to add on that real quick, I mean, again, in the Ecology Plus programs, we have people who are sort of an expert on one side or the other. And we've had some of our best students are often the ones that have no quantitative background. I mean, if you're taking an ecology and data science, presumably you're really interested in it, but some of those who really thrived in those have come in with really no background. And they really use that as an excuse to learn that, and that's what they're interested in learning. Again, in these courses, we don't assume any background. So although it can be really useful, we do start from scratch in the computational methods courses. For things like the MRes, where you're doing more research, I think having right from the beginning, you're going to want to have a little bit more of a background in statistics or programming or something. But we also can give you some, if you're uncertain about some of these things, we can give you some training, self-learning that you can do, even just a few hours can get you up to speed. So you sort of can hit the ground running in the first few weeks as well.
Fernando, I see your hands up, but I'm just going to take a message out of the chat. So if you just hold on for 1 minute, because Saranya has just asked sort of 3 questions. So the second of one, I think the second question, or maybe even the second and third, Dan has largely, sorry, the third question Dan has largely picked up. So we don't assume that anyone necessarily has any statistical and programming expertise when they come onto the course. I think what we do is if that you don't have any of that expertise, we send you before the course starts some links to online resources that you can use to sort of familiarize yourself with some of these things, so that when you come in on day 1, you're not coming in completely cold. But certainly, yeah. And I think probably we tend to find that it's with the statistics and the programming where people have the largest range of variation. So we have some people that have done a lot of that, and that module is slightly easier for them. Although we try and, for those people, we try and give them things that will sort of challenge them as well. But certainly, every year we get people who don't have any statistical expertise or experience of R. So yeah, we certainly do recommend you looking at some things before you arrive, so that on day 1 it's not a shock. And then just to quickly answer your other two questions. So in terms of identifying dissertation topics, so that is something that for the Ecology Plus students and for the MSc at Bloomsbury, that sort of tends to happen, I guess, probably sort of February time, February, March. That the booklet for projects for those courses goes out in February, and then you have an opportunity to talk to the supervisors and plan what project that you want to take. So the current students, that'll be happening in the next few weeks. And then in terms of pre-existing data sets, that's something else that we do tend to have from time to time. And there the question is exactly what those data comprise, and then identifying a supervisor that is suitable to help you do analysis with that. But clearly, if you're coming in with some long-term monitoring data that you could usefully analyze for your dissertation, then that's something that we would encourage you to explore and to look into. Sorry, Fernando, thanks for
No
waiting.
problem. No problem. Okay. In turn to students take a nature smart challenge. I was wondering, this is a workshop, or it's a field trip, or it's a special course. Could you explain in detail about that?
Yeah, happy to. So this is the one that I mentioned where you get paired up with a some sort of organization, non-academic organization. This could be industry, again, government, conservation organizations, really agricultural companies, right? Really across the board, depending on the specific program that you're taking. And the idea is that it's a regular module, so it meets every week. And part of this is going over different skills that you'll need. So for example, like there's skills on actually how to develop research, how to understand, how to start to put together a proposal. And the idea is that you'll get paired up with or several other students, so maybe 3 or 4 of you in a group. You will then meet regularly with your partner organization, and maybe that could be every week, every other week. And together as a group, you actually write a proposal for solving this challenge. So at the end of this course, we have basically a symposium where all of the partners come to UCL East, and your group will give a presentation on your solution to this challenge. So it's essentially learning how to write proposals as much as anything, but it's really targeted. And the idea is you don't come up with the idea, you just take what you learned in the course to develop a solution. And again, like students love it. We've had some great success with it because it's not just about learning, and very often what you're doing is you're bringing something to that organization that they aren't experts in. So, maybe they want some solution about water drainage, or how to deal with water runoff or pollution. And you can take what you've learned in the course to give them a solution, and they don't have those skills or expertise because maybe no one has been trained in that. So really that's what we're trying to do, is bring together organizations that don't have a skill and giving them students who are learning these skills to come up with some solution. So yeah, it's a really cool course. That's why it sort of links all of the 3 Ecology Plus modules have this. The only difference being the partners maybe are more data science driven on the EDS, and maybe they're more, again, sustainability or built environment for urban engineering.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Fernando. Another question from Inez. When can we hear back from admissions? Yeah, that's a good question. I can easily answer that there is no interview process. So we just take your application and we check it, and then we let you know the outcome of that. So don't worry about an interview. Admissions is something of a movable feast. Sometimes they move quickly and sometimes they move very slowly. We are sort of encouraged to, so those of us that actually look at admissions, do regularly check our inboxes and process them quickly so that they're not at least sitting on our desks. But given that UCL is rather a large organization with several tens of thousands of students coming every year and more applicants than that, sometimes there can be a little bit of a lag in the system. So I wouldn't get overly stressed if you haven't heard. If you think they're being a bit slow, they can be.
Yeah, and just as for the Ecology Plus, we try to aim to basically within 2 weeks, we'll try to turn those, once admissions sends them to us, we'll try to review them within 2 weeks. But just make sure you're keeping on track of your admissions emails because oftentimes they will ask for additional information, which can slow things down. And then once we send it back to admissions, to be fair, I think it's a couple weeks before they will then post-process. But it should be relatively quick. If it's been a long time and you haven't heard anything, you can always reach out to the module convener just to make sure there's not something hung up on our end as well. The one thing I will say about admissions, so if you, for example, if you are apply for ecology and data science and your background is in, Russian literature, I might then send you an email and say, could we have a quick chat? I just mostly just to make sure that you know what you're getting into. And again, I said that because I now have a PhD student who came through the ecology and data science whose background was in literature. And it's just useful to make sure that this is really what you want. And generally we say like, if you don't have the stats math background, hopefully you have some ecology background. Learning both of those things at the same time can take a bit of work. So when I do see something come across, if you're a strong student, we would love to have you here. I'd like to send you an email and say, even just through email, say, are you sure this is what you want? Here's what to expect, or sometimes hop on a quick Zoom. But otherwise, there wouldn't be an interview for it. Yeah. Any other questions, concerns? Okay. Well, I guess with that in mind, again, if something comes up, you can always find one of whoever is the module lead, or email us and we can put you in touch with them. And and Ian just put the information. So again, you can email that. Those are sort of general mailboxes, and they will find their way to us. We'd love to have you here next year. And if anything else comes up, please get in touch.
Yeah, and I would just finish by saying that you can find our alumni on social media, on sort of LinkedIn and Blue Sky, sometimes on Instagram. Don't feel shy about dropping them a line and asking them what the course was like. I think you'll get positive responses. I mean, I could say, oh, email Becky or, message this person or that person, but I would just say, see who you can find and see what they have to say, because I think you'll get an honest opinion from them, and I think you'll get a positive view as well. I think genuinely we have some good courses here. And on that, I will say thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Good luck for the next few months, and we hope to see many or all of you come September.